So a lot of people ask the age-old question, what came first? Was it the chicken or the egg? Well, what if I told you that that argument can also tie into today's modern topic, who hurt who first? Or who does the most damage? Men or women? And I'm talking about in the aspect of relationships and potential relationships. And today we're going to go ahead and visit that topic. And what if I told you that it actually goes a lot further back than you think it does, right? Before we get into that, it's Marcus Frazier from Teachable Tuesdays, here to motivate you, encourage you, and inspire you to be a better you. Thank you for joining me today. Greatly appreciate it. As always, if you could, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification button to stay up to date with all of my Teachable Tuesdays videos and content and all that good stuff. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this very interesting topic, if you will, right? And I will say that this topic did not come out on my own. It really came about as inspiration from someone who actually left a comment on my video from last week, which thank you for everybody that tuned in and gave you input. Greatly appreciate it. And she made the statement of how, she was talking about, her thoughts in the video, and just thought about how men don't necessarily get emotionally supported. And as a result, and you correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below if you're watching this, how sometimes men can actually hurt women more than women hurt men. And the reason why I bring this up is because y'all know it's been a gender war going on for the longest, and this shouldn't even be the case. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that men and women have to agree on everything, but the fact that a lot of men and women are at war with each other, I find it to be problematic because we were never meant to be at war with each other. We were meant to complement one another. So the fact that we're going against each other, and again, I'm not saying everybody, but it does certainly happen a lot, and maybe it's amplified based on what you see on social media. Maybe it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be, but it seems pretty bad, right? It bothers me. It bothers me a lot because God created man and woman to do what? To essentially complement each other. We know that God created man first. You know the book of Genesis, how Adam was around, and then he took the rib from Adam and created Eve as a helpmate because God basically said in a nutshell, it's not good for man to be alone. So I'll help him with a provider, someone who can assist him with his purpose. You know what I'm saying? As Adam was on his purpose, and, pretty much Eve came in the picture to help amplify that purpose, right? So when you think about who hurts people more, do men hurt people more or do women hurt people more? I think it's no simple conclusion of an answer to get to that. But I will say this. Both of them hurt each other pretty badly. Both men hurt women pretty badly. Women hurt men pretty badly. And what happens is you have this cycle of hurt that constantly perpetuates its ugly face. And next thing you know, people are still getting hurt over and over again because as the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. And when hurt people refuse to put in the work to do healing, refuse to put in the work to be better, the cycle just continues. So it's not necessarily a one-sided thing as far as who hurts people more, even though you'll hear oftentimes that bad boys become bad boys because of the way that women treat them. But you could also argue that women become, cold and quote-unquote more masculine, so to speak, because of the way that men treated them. So they become closed and shut off. And both statements can be true for both sides, but only if both sides allow it to be. Now, let me just go ahead and make something clear. I'm not saying by any means that one should not protect their heart. I'm not saying that by any means one should not understand what's going on and as a result, not be foolish. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be gullible, but I guess it really boils down to what do you do when you've been hurt? And we're going to revisit that in a second because, again, the hurt process actually goes back to Genesis, right? And bear with me now because I'm going to say some things that people may agree with, people may disagree with. Y'all comment below and let me know. But I think when men hurt women and women hurt men, oftentimes it is a misfiring. It is a lack of understanding, if you will, right? And we're going to take it to Genesis when pretty much Eve ate from the tree, and Adam also ate from the tree. So you know this, we know the story in Genesis. Serpent came in the Bible and basically was saying, hey, you can eat from this tree. And Eve is telling him, like, no. God told me I can eat from anywhere I want. But this particular tree, I shall not eat from. The day I should eat some, I'll die. And the serpent says, well, you won't die. He told you not to do that because you'll become like him, well-knowing and all knowledgeable, right? So, again, Eve eats from the tree. And notice, and I'm going to go back and correct myself if I'm wrong, but notice nothing happens at that moment. She tastes the fruit. We don't know what type of fruit it was. Bible doesn't say. And then she gives it to Adam. And Adam eats. And at that moment, both of their eyes awaken. And they both become knowledgeable. And they realize that they're what? They realize they're naked. And therefore, they try to hide from God. God comes in the garden like, hey, yo, where you at, bro? I'm paraphrasing here. But the rest is history. So, well, no. I'm sorry. I got to touch base on one more point. But then, Adam is like, why y'all hiding from me? And he was like, well, we know it's from naked. And he was like, how do you know you're naked? And Adam was like, well, I ate from the fruit. Didn't I tell you not to eat from that fruit? And Adam was like, well, Eve gave it to me. And Eve was like, no, the serpent gave it to me. And he's like, oh, Lord. He said, all right, so, serpent, you going to go ahead and, you going to crawl in the belly. And again, I'm paraphrasing him. Give me the fun version. You going to crawl in the belly for the earth. Till the day you die. Told Eve, when you give birth to children, it's going to be painful. Told Adam, hey, you going to have to work until the day you die. Right? So a lot of people, I know they make the joke, it's Eve's fault that we're in the predicament that we're in. And a lot of people think it's Adam's fault because he should have had more control. But I'm going to connect the three just for a second, right? Notice there was a misfiring, misunderstanding, miscommunication with, we're not going to say the serpent, because the serpent came in, as we like to say, the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. We say that especially in the black church, right? The serpent pretty much wanted to disrupt what was going on, right? Between man and woman. Notice that before the serpent came along, Adam and Eve had their thing going on, yin and yang. You know what I'm saying? Adam was doing this thing, Eve was helping him. Why do I bring this up? The serpent represents the world and how the world does whatever it can.
Time 20.
Hold on. Sorry about that. You know how this is. Nike app goes off, especially when I'm taking my walks during my planning period. But what happened? Serpent came in the picture, pretty much disrupted everything. The serpent represents the world, right? What is the world's job to do? The world's job is to pretty much mess up anything, in my personal opinion, that God created as such. God created man and woman to be a perfect representation of yin and yang, balance, right? Man and woman was that balance created by God. So the serpent represents the world. What is the world trying to do today in its own various ways? Split man and woman apart. And that's why we are at war with each other. That's why people will argue and say men hurt women more than women hurt men, and women hurt men more than, you get what I'm saying, right? So what can we do about this? What can we do to stop the hurt? What can we do to stop the pain? Excuse the big old sun all in my face, all in the camera, taking up all the spotlight, no pun intended. But yeah, let me fix that a little bit. What can we do to fix that? Well, I think one of the things that we have to do, and I'm gonna turn my face around for a second, walk backwards. We have to recognize the root of the problem, right? The root of the problem is people have been getting hurt for so long that we don't know how to, I guess you could say in a sense, go about acting properly. And when I say acting properly, I mean like legit being able to love from a space that's free, being able to accept from a space that's free. It always has to be done with condition, right? And I know that there are certain things in life that involve conditions, that should involve conditions, but I don't think that love should be one of them. I think people should be able to love freely, right? People should be able to love the way God wanted us to love. But because there's been such a long history of hurt in various ways, people are not afforded that opportunity, right? Because of what the world is disrupting. But also as individuals, and I kind of said this in my last video from Tuesday to some degree, you got to be willing to recognize when you've been hurt. You got to. And a lot of people can't. And because they can't, that means you're not willing to put in the effort to heal. And when you don't put in the effort, what ends up happening? Well, the cycle continues. You become guarded up, more and more guarded up. And shoot, these days, both sides do such a good job at being guarded up. We ain't really getting nowhere. In my personal opinion, it used to be men that would be severely guarded up. But shoot, the ladies are doing such a good job at it these days, you can't tell which is which. It's almost like you can't tell which way is left and which way is right. And it's a shame, y'all. It's a shame that either side has had to get to that point. But we have to get to the point where we understand it's not even about who damaged who anymore. It's about how do we get to a place of understanding with one another. In my personal opinion, both sides, and I've said this many, many times on this channel, both sides need to sit down, have a conversation with each other, and let it air out. I think that's the best way to go about doing it. Let it just air it all on out. Don't sugarcoat nothing. Don't pull no punches. Don't be rude. Don't be disrespectful. I'm sorry. I know y'all see me keep seeing this camera. I'm trying not to get the sun in the way. But yeah, that's the start of it. Then there's also fundamental things from a modern standpoint. When we talk about hurt that's caused by people, right? Where did that hurt stem from? Where did it stem from? Did it stem from an early place of childhood trauma? Did it stem from relationships that you developed as a teenager or as an adult? I gave you an example in my last video, and I'll say it again. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I've been dealing with issues of abandonment. That came from my romantic relationships as an adult. But for some people, maybe it came for them sooner, right? So that's how I'm looking at it. People got to be willing to understand that stuff like this just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? Stuff like this happens because people are not willing to identify the root of the problem. We've identified the major root of the problem, how this all started. But the root of the problem within yourself will vary person to person. And it's not an easy fix. It's not a quick solution. But it's something that you have to really sit down by yourself and identify. And you can't identify your hurt if you're covering things up or if you're constantly blaming others. I know this because I can tell you this from firsthand experience. I used to come from a place of where, man, women are always willing to be hurting a guy like me. Until I realized maybe it's not just that. Maybe there's some other underlying issues going on here. And that's not to say that I was necessarily doing anything right or wrong, but it's, again, identifying the root of the problem as opposed to the symptoms of the problem. So it goes back to my original question. Who hurt people more? Do men hurt women more or do women hurt men more? The answer to that is neither. It's really neither. Both people hurt people. And because both people hurt people, we put ourselves in a position to where nobody is willing to put in the work to get to a healed territory. It's not necessarily man's fault. It's not necessarily woman's fault. If you really want to point the blame at anything, it's the disruption of worldly patterns that have gotten us to this point. We have gotten so far away from biblical principles, and we've gotten so far away from certain traditional customs. I ain't gonna say all traditional customs, but certain things that have gotten us to this point. So what do? We have to go back to the root, and then we have to go and find a a way that we can meet common ground. I know some of y'all are like, well, Marcus, that's not my responsibility. I completely understand where you're coming from. But it's all of our responsibility to some degree, one way or another. Regardless if you have a significant other or not. Regardless if you've been in a relationship recently or not. We as humans, despite our different thought processes, different methods of going about certain things, we were never created to be in calamity with one another. We were created for unity. That's how it all started. And somehow we've gotten away from that to the point where it's gotten so bad that, God darn it, even in our own specific countries, we got men and women that are against each other. You know, it's one thing if you country versus country, you know, I get that. That happened in the Bible. People went to war. But people within their own camps, not saying they weren't at war, but oftentimes more than not, they at least came together on a united front with that. We can't even do that these days. Shoot, we can't even do that outside of the whole men and women argument. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. You know what I'm saying? Bottom line is, as men and women, if we want to get past the point to where we can get along better, if we want to get past the point, or to the point, to where we can understand that we need each other a little bit more, we got to be willing to put in the work in ourselves. There's no other way around it. You don't put the work in for you, you'll never be able to see things. And when I say put the work in, I don't mean just going to the gym. I don't mean just eating healthy and things like that. You do that for you. But as far as what we can do for each other, we need to sit down and understand where each other are coming from. Yes, men and women are not the same. We will never be the same. We operate differently. People say we're equal. We're not equal. We're equitable. It's a difference. But the one thing I can say is that men and women, most certainly when they're ready to, can come to an understanding of, look, this is how you operate. This is how I operate. This is how we do things on a general scale. Because it's also understanding the complexity of, there's things that have to be understood in the general sense, but there are things that also have to be understood in a more complex sense. The general sense is, point blank period, men are masculine, women are feminine. That could be a general sense. But the complex aspect of it is bigger than that. Because even though I'm a man and you a woman, and there are certain things that come along with being a man, certain things that come along with being a woman, I'm not going to be the same man as the last guy you met. You're not going to be the same woman from the last woman that I met. My mama going to act totally different from you. Your daddy going to act totally different from mine. My male students might act differently from your male students if you're a teacher. If I have a child one day, I have a boy and a girl, they might act totally different than what your boy or girl may act like. I don't think men and women will ever completely understand each other, but I think we need to at least get to a point where there's some common ground on the general understandings, the general feel-throughs of why we are the way that we are and why people are affected when it comes to damage. And then again, at the end of the day, man or woman, doesn't matter. You still have to do the internal work. Because if you don't do the internal work within your healing, within getting closer to God, within understanding these patterns, you're just going to continue to either hurt other people, or you're going to continue to play the blame game and say, well, all men ain't crap and they bad and they this. Well, all women ain't crap, they bad and they this. Again, let's work towards unity and stop working on separation. That's why I do videos like this. That's one of the reasons why I do videos particularly about men. Sometimes I do videos particularly about women. Sometimes I do videos like this where it's about both. Because I want both to be better. But we can only be better if we're willing to do better. Marcus Frazier from Teachable Tuesdays here to motivate you, encourage you, and inspire you to be a better you. Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Sorry the video went on a little bit too long, but hey, listen, if the point got across, that's what matters. Share the video, leave a comment below, leave a like, tell me what you think. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.